On July 20th, 2014, the man who spent 20 years pulling the oldest temple on Earth out of a Turkish hillside went for a swim and never came back. Klaus Schmidt was 60. What he uncovered rewrote the human story. Carved stone pillars taller than a person, standing 6,000 years before Stonehenge, built by people who weren't supposed to build anything. Then the digging slowed to almost nothing. Today, over 90% of Göbekli Tepe is still under the dirt, and officials say it may stay buried for 150 more years. Everyone keeps asking the same one-word question: why? The pillars are the part nobody can explain away. Schmidt's team uncovered rings of them on a bare limestone hill whose name means potbelly hill in Turkish. The biggest stand around 5.5 meters tall and weigh as much as 10 to 20 tons, T-shaped, cut from the bedrock and dragged into place, then carved with foxes and vultures and scorpions and snakes so sharp you can still read them 11,600 years later. And look closely, because the pillars aren't just posts, they're bodies. Many have arms carved down their sides, hands meeting at the front, belts and loincloths cut into the rock. They're stylized people, standing in a ring, facing inward. And we almost never found any of it. A survey team walked over this hill back in 1963 and wrote it off as an abandoned medieval cemetery. It sat ignored for 30 years until Schmidt took a second look in 1994 and realized the buried stones poking out of the dirt were thousands of years older than anyone had guessed. That date is the whole problem. This place went up around 9,600 BC, before farming, before pottery, before writing, before the wheel. The people who built it were hunter-gatherers, and according to everything we thought we knew, hunter-gatherers didn't organize, didn't quarry stone, and definitely didn't raise monuments. Schmidt's summary of it became famous. First the temple, then the city. The temple, he argued, may have come first, and the town grew up around it afterward. One hill in southern Turkey flipped the accepted order of how civilization began. Which raises a simple question. If this place is that important, why has almost none of it been dug up? The number underneath all of this is small and a little unsettling. In a 1911 interview, Schmidt himself estimated that only about 5% of Gobekli Tepe had been excavated. The German Archaeological Institute, which runs the dig, later put it closer to 10% as of 2021. Either way, the math is staggering. Ground-penetrating radar and magnetic surveys have mapped more than a dozen additional stone rings still sleeping under the surface, on top of the roughly 9 the archaeologists have already opened, with an estimated 200 pillars still buried in the hill. The people who work the site have said out loud that fully excavating it could take another 150 years. And to feel how old this place is, the pyramids of Giza, which seem impossibly ancient to us, actually sit closer in time to us than to the people who raised these pillars. The single discovery that rewrote human prehistory, and we've seen maybe a tenth of it. Whatever else is down there, the carvings, the buildings, maybe answers to questions we haven't thought to ask yet, is sitting a few feet under the dirt right now, untouched. And for 2 decades, the digging moved fast. Schmidt worked that hill season after season and kept pulling more of it into the light. Then that stopped. And the reason it stopped is where this story gets strange. When Schmidt died in the summer of 2014, the project didn't die with him, but it changed. The excavation slowed down hard, and the focus shifted from opening new ground to conserving and studying what was already exposed. New leadership took over. Since 2020, the dig has been run by the Turkish archaeologist Necmi Karol, with Lee Clare of the German Archaeological Institute coordinating the fieldwork. On paper, That's a completely normal handover. A founding excavator dies. The next generation takes charge, and priorities move from speed to preservation. But look at it from the outside, the way millions of people online did. The man who found the site dies suddenly. Almost immediately, the digging nearly stops. The parts that were open start getting covered back over for protection. And the official reason that they need to slow down and preserve it sounds an awful lot like an excuse. To a huge audience, that timeline didn't read as caution. It read as a lid going on. So the internet did what the internet does. It filled the silence with a theory. Several theories, actually, each one bigger than the last. The core belief is simple, and you can feel why it took hold. It goes like this. Gobekli Tepe proves advanced people existed thousands of years before the history books allow. And somebody, the archaeologists, the Turkish government, some larger power, does not want that story fully told. So they slowed the dig, reburied the evidence, and they're sitting on whatever is left in the ground. From there, it branches. One version says the builders themselves buried the site on purpose to hide something. And the modern reburial is just history repeating. Another says the World Economic Forum, the group behind the Davos summit, quietly took control of it. There's a widely shared claim that Klaus Schwab, the man who founded that summit, personally admitted they were leaving the site, buried for future generations, as if that were a confession. And the comments under these videos are not casual. These aren't 3 or 4 cranks. Some of these videos have millions of views, and the comment sections read like a congregation. People write that we've been lied to about the past, that the further back you dig, the more dangerous the truth gets, that regular people have to carry the torch because the experts won't. That feeling that we're not getting the whole story is doing real work on a lot of sharp people. So instead of laughing it off, we did the slow thing. We checked the claims, one by one, starting with the one that went most viral. The claim that spread fastest was about trees. In 2024, a popular YouTuber named Jimmy Corsetti started sounding the alarm that olive trees had been planted directly over Gobekli Tepe, right on top of the unexcavated ground. And the framing was damning. Why would anyone plant an orchard on the most important archaeological site on Earth, unless the whole point was to make sure it could never be dug up? It's a good question. It also has an answer, and the answer is the reverse of the accusation. According to Carul, those olive trees were planted years earlier by local landowners, because trees on your property raise the compensation the government has to pay when it takes the land. Over time, the roots of those trees started growing down toward the fragile buildings buried in the hill. So the excavation team dug the trees out to save the ruins underneath, and handed them to the Regional Forestry Service to be replanted somewhere else. Read that back, slowly. The single piece of evidence that launched 1,000 cover-up videos, the trees, turns out to be the archaeologists doing the exact thing the conspiracy says they refuse to do: guarding what's in the ground. Which brings us to the biggest claim of all, the one with a famous name attached. The idea that the World Economic Forum controls Gobekli Tepe sounds unhinged, until you learn where it comes from, because there is a real thread here. It's just been pulled completely out of shape. The true part is this. Back in January 2016, a Turkish company called the Dogus Group announced it would sponsor Gobekli Tepe, a 20-year commitment worth around $15 million, to help fund the visitor center and the protective structures over the site. And they announced it at Davos, at the forum's annual meeting. The company's chairman, Ferit Sahenk, called the site, quote, "our 0 point in time," unquote. So yes, there's a Davos connection. A corporation announced a sponsorship at a business conference, which is what business conferences are for. That's the entire link. There is no evidence the World Economic Forum runs the excavation, sets its pace, or decides what gets dug. And that famous Klaus Schwab quote, the supposed confession that they're leaving the site buried for future generations. Nobody can find it. No transcript, no video, no press release, nothing. It appears to be invented, and the detail that gives it away is almost funny. That phrase, leaving it for future generations, isn't a slip from a billionaire. It's the archaeologist's own reason for going slow. Someone took the scientist's actual argument, put it in Schwab's mouth, and called it a cover-up. If you want the real version of these stories instead of the recycled one, subscribe. We take apart one ancient site like this every week. Now, the one accusation that actually has something behind it. Not every complaint about Göbekli Tepe is a fantasy. One of them is real, and it deserves to be taken seriously. In 2018, as crews built the walkways and a huge protective canopy for tourists, photos started circulating that appeared to show concrete being poured near the excavation. Part of what drove the rush was a deadline. Turkey was pushing to get Göbekli Tepe onto the UNESCO World Heritage List, which it achieved in 2018, and a lot of the building, including a €6.6 million steel roof covering roughly 4,000 square meters of the dig, went up fast to be ready in time. The outrage was immediate, and it didn't come from cranks. It came from inside the field. One of the loudest voices was Klaus Schmidt's own widow, the archaeologist Tigd M. Köksal Schmidt, who had worked at the site and said the construction was damaging it. A veteran Turkish archaeologist, Nezi Bazgalen, called the work, quote, a disaster. The Turkish authorities pushed back hard. They said no concrete or asphalt ever touched the ancient structures, that the work was a walkway and a service road more than a kilometer from the enclosures, and that they used protective material, not raw concrete, on the archaeology itself. So who's right? The honest version is messy. Serious archaeologists really did raise the alarm about how fast the site was being turned into a tourist attraction, and that concern came from people with real standing. But the specific viral claim that they cemented over the world's oldest temple is not what the evidence shows. That gap is the pattern under every one of these stories. A genuine fight over how to protect the site keeps getting rewritten as a plot to hide it. Which finally brings us back to the oldest version of the burial claim, the one about the builders themselves. For decades, the story went that the people who built Gobekli Tepe deliberately buried it themselves. Schmidt believed the enclosures were intentionally backfilled, packed with rubble and bone and stone tools once a building's life was over, almost like a ritual burial of the temple. The alt history crowd loves this, because if the ancients buried it on purpose, maybe they were hiding it, and maybe the modern archaeologists are just finishing the job. But almost nobody pushing the cover-up angle mentions what happened next. The archaeologists themselves started to doubt the deliberate burial idea. Researchers now working the site, including Moritz Kinzel and Claire, have argued that a lot of that fill probably wasn't a careful ritual at all. It looks more like ordinary decay. Walls collapsing, mud washing downhill, the site slowly getting swallowed by erosion over centuries. Kinzel's point is that the buildings may have stood and been used far longer than anyone assumed before nature covered them. So the oldest version of the conspiracy quietly comes apart too. Gobekli Tepe may not have been hidden by anyone. It may have simply been swallowed by the hill, slowly, over thousands of years, the way ruins usually are. Which leaves the real question standing, the one we started with. If it's not a cover-up, why is the site still almost entirely buried? The answer is almost boring, and that is exactly why it's so hard for people to accept. Gobekli Tepe is 90% buried because the archaeologists are deliberately choosing to leave most of it in the ground. Their reasoning is the opposite of a cover-up. They believe that digging the whole site up now, with today's tools, would destroy information that better technology could recover later. Some of the tools they'd want don't exist yet. Others barely did when Schmidt was alive, like reading ancient DNA straight out of buried sediment. Dig the ground up now with a trowel, and you burn the chance to ever use the better tools on it. Because digging is a one-way door. You only get to excavate a layer once, and the moment the soil comes out, the exact position of everything inside it is gone for good. Claire, who coordinates the dig, put it about as bluntly as an archaeologist can. Talking to NPR in 2025, he said, quote, "You can't just bulldoze a site to get everything out. That's the wrong approach." He said something else that gets to the heart of it. Why would he be so selfish, he asked, as to dig up the entire site and take that chance away from future archaeologists who will have better tools than we do? So they're leaving it on purpose, as a gift to people who aren't born yet. After looking into the whole controversy, NPR reached the least exciting conclusion possible. The archaeologists aren't hiding anything. They're trying to protect it. And Karul, the man running the project, has called the claims that the dig was halted, quote, completely unfounded, pointing out that in 2024 alone, a team of around 70 people worked the site from spring into the fall. The dig never stopped. It just slowed down, on purpose, run by the people with the most to lose if it goes wrong. So why does the cover-up feeling refuse to die, even after every specific claim falls apart? Because underneath the fake controversy, there's a real one, and it's happening in public. In 2017, a researcher named Martin Sweatman argued that one of the most famous carvings at the site, a pillar covered in animals that's become known as the vulture stone, a vulture with its wings spread, a scorpion, a headless human figure beneath them, is actually a coded record of a comet strike that hit Earth around 10,900 BC. That comet is tied to a real and fiercely argued climate event called the Younger Dryas, a sudden cold snap that slammed the planet right around then. If Sweatman is right, the people at Göbekli Tepe were tracking the sky and recording a global catastrophe in stone, which would make them far more advanced than the textbooks say. The German Archaeological Institute's team publicly rejected the reading in a paper that basically said he was seeing meaning in the carvings that isn't there. And that is what keeps the suspicion alive. Regular viewers watch a credentialed outsider make an astonishing claim, then watch the official institution shoot it down, and it looks exactly like gatekeeping. Usually it isn't. It's how science actually works, out loud, in slow motion, with people openly disagreeing. But from the outside, a scientist saying no can be hard to tell, apart from a scientist hiding something. That confusion is where the whole cover-up story comes from. So here is where that leaves us. The oldest monument humans ever built is sitting under a hillside in Turkey, and most of it is still down there. The reason is the one we've been circling this whole time. The people who found it decided the rest belongs to a generation that can dig it better than we can. Somewhere under that dirt are hundreds more pillars, whole buildings nobody has ever stepped inside, carvings that have been staring into total darkness since before the first farmer planted the first seed. And Gobekli Tepe isn't even alone. Less than 50 kilometers away sits Karahan Tepe, where archaeologists have opened a chamber of tall pillars cut straight from the bedrock and a human head carved into the rock wall, staring out at the room. And this whole cluster has a name now, Tas Tepeler, the Stone Hills, a Turkish-led project slowly uncovering around a dozen sister sites across the same stretch of southern Turkey. Each one adds to a picture we're only starting to see. The real story is the least dramatic answer on the table. The people who understand this place best looked at the greatest discovery in human prehistory, saw that most of it was still in the ground, and chose to leave it there, on purpose, for people who aren't born yet. That might be the most patient thing our species has ever done. We already pulled apart the network of sister sites they're digging up right now, and that breakdown is on screen. Go see what's coming out of the ground next.